Well, hello. Welcome back to Apologetics 101. I am your host, Christian apologist Brian Keith Bowen. Today, we're going to be doing something that's been long that has not been dealt with on my channel for a long time, but it's been coming for a while. A while back, there was not too long ago, but a while back there was an incredible resurrection debate, a 7-hour debate between Bart Ehrman and Mike Lacuna. It was a pay-per-view debate. You had to pay for it to view it and have it, but you have lifetime access to it. So I have a lifetime access to it because I did pay for it. And you might wonder, why pay for a debate when you get it for free? Well, because this is not no normal debate. No debate has ever been this long. It's extremely long debate where they were able to cover a lot more issues. Unfortunately, it gave Bart enough time to throw up a lot of irrelevant issues like gospel differences and things like that. These are important issues. These are important discussion topics that deserve their own debate, and they do have their own debate. And there's obviously very good responses to Bart's arguments, and there's a lot of factually inaccurate statements he made about it and things like that. But for the purpose of the resurrection debate, it is completely irrelevant because our sources of information is even earlier than the Gospels. And because of that, the evidence, and besides, the Gospels actually agree on the core details of this event. So, of course, the differences are in the peripheral, and they're not as significant as Bart likes to make them out to be. And a lot of times there's very, very plausible explanations to harmonizing the accounts. And a lot of times the skeptics are ignoring context and things like that. And I'm actually writing a book on alleged Bible differences, so they're included in that. This would not be the purpose of this debate, this debate review, because one thing, it was irrelevant to the subject that they were debating to begin with. Second of all, I do plan on maybe doing some more stuff with this particular debate, as viewing other topic matters later on down the road on other videos and things like that. But for the purpose of my debate review, I'm mainly going to focus on two primary arguments that Bart makes in the debate. One, he makes during his opening case on natural law, on the laws of nature. And that's his biggest selling point throughout the course of the debate. So I think that's a big, huge deal to talk about and that sort of thing. I was kind of disappointed. I heard that, originally when I first paid for the debate, that this would that he was going to throw some curveballs at Mike. And granted, this is not something that Bart normally argued for in his debate, so it's new for Bart to bring up. But it's not really a new argument, not for skeptics in general. Skeptics have been bringing that up for a long time. It's been proven false over and over again, and most skeptics don't even bother bringing it up anymore. But Bart did bring it up during the course of this debate, and we'll get into that. Again, I'm going to cut through all the I'm not going to be dealing with, at least at this time, stuff that's completely irrelevant to the subject of the matter of the debate. I'm not going to be dealing with most of the issues that are brought up, because I just want to center focus on that particular thing, because that's his main selling point throughout the course of the debate. There will be a second argument that he makes during the closing argument, and I do want to deal with that as well. Now, I have personally got permission through email from the group that did all of this with the debate, and I've been calling them Team Ehrman, and so they sent me a link, and since then they've actually did what they said that they were going to eventually do. They formulated into different segments, so you can watch different sections of the debate, which I think is convenient. I'm glad they did that. But it also helps me on not doing the debate review as well, so I don't have to go through the entire debate trying to find sections and that sort of thing, because they kind of did the work for me, so that's great. But when I contacted him, I asked him if I could do a debate review about it. He said yes. The law of fair use allows you to do clips, short clips from the debate and to be able to do a debate review on it. And I said, well, how short? I asked that question specifically because the law of fair use actually doesn't give us the time length of the clips. It just says that you're allowed to do it. I think it's because they give these little vague things, the open interpretation, because they want other people, the parties involved, to make the decision on that, or if it really gets challenged, go to courts and let the courts decide. Because there are things they're subject to interpretation in the law of fair use and that sort of thing. So I asked specifically, I said, how many minutes, how long does these clips need to be? They said the clips need to be 7 minutes long. And I have the email, so I have it in writing. If there's any disputes, I have it in writing. They said up to 7 minutes. So any of my clips, all my clips must be down to 7 minutes. That means whenever I show you a clip, I'm permanently central focused on the opening case, and there won't be a point where it go by even a couple minutes before I'll end up showing my pretty mug and talking about it and responding to it. And I'm only doing that section of it, and I'm only doing it in increments of clips. I'm not going to be, they'll be very short. And then I'm going to do the closing argument as well. The closing argument was total of 5 minutes. So even if I played the whole closing argument, it'll be within the 7 minute range. But I'll probably likely be going back and forth like I'm doing in the opening segment. But like I said, I'm not going to be dealing with anything else. And I did do a video recently on theories of ethics, so that was interesting. It was unrelated to this topic matter, but I did that while I was still in the almost at the rear end of my classes. So that's the reason why I haven't produced that many videos. In case you're not aware of that, I did mention that in other videos that I was fixing to start school back in May, a couple months, and that will slow down my video production, and I do apologize for that. But it was unavoidable. I had to sit there and go to my school. I had to get through my classes. I had to make sure I could turn my work in time. It's much more time sensitive than me producing videos. And so that's what I focused on. But I did try to produce at least a video while I was doing that. I had a conversation with my professor in my ethics class. So that was interesting. And so you can watch that on YouTube. That was the last video I did. I also plan on doing a very big series soon on the book of Genesis. It's called the Genesis series. It's not going to be like my Genesis controversy. It's going to be done a little bit different. It's not a podcast within a podcast. It's not going to have its own theme or anything like that. But it's going to be it's going to be more commentary type, but it's going to be topological as well. And it's going to be dealing with a lot of different issues. And I plan on trying to see if I can bring people in to have conversations with me over different various issues. I plan on inviting Dr. Jason Lau back. It's going to be real big. It's probably going to be the biggest thing I've ever done on this channel. Biggest thing of anything I've ever done in Genesis or anything else for that matter. Because I'm going to have a lot of videos in it. I plan on doing a video on radiometric dating. I plan on doing and I plan on, like I said, bringing people in. I'm trying to get as many experts in as I can to have this discussion with me. And so that's going to be interesting. It's really interesting. But it's going to follow another video that I plan on doing after this one, a debate review that I plan on doing between Ken Hovind and a girl named Maddie on modern day debate. And I'm planning on doing that also. But I plan on doing that before I do my Genesis series. Be kind of like a kind of prelude to it, just to kind of get everything revved up for a whole subject matter on Genesis. So it's going to be really interesting. The commentary sections mostly going to be focused on the first 11 chapters of Genesis, because that's where it gets challenged and attacked the most. And so that's the focus point of this series. Although if you really like it and really want me to, I'll continue it chapters 12 to 50 if you want me to do that. But it's going to deal with a lot of different things. It's going to deal with issues involving the Big Bang Theory, evolution. It's going to be dealing with a lot of different stuff, and it's going to be cool. It's going to be the biggest thing I've ever produced on this channel, and it's going to have a lot of videos involved in it. It doesn't mean I might not produce other videos unrelated to that series during that time. Always possible. Could do debate reviews or something like that. But this is gonna be cool. It's not gonna be like my Genesis controversy. I do plan on incorporating these kinds of stuff into my channel as a whole, and I can always do other things eventually on it. But like I said, this is gonna be done in a commentary section, style. So it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be really big, and I plan on making it like the biggest thing I've ever done on this channel. But in any case, it's just something I'm really passionate about, and I've been thinking about it for a while after I started school, and I think it'll go pretty well. Any given case, today though, we're going to be doing the debate review, Bart Ehrman, between Bart Ehrman and Mike Licona, and we're starting right now. All right, we're back, and let's get started.
Where did we get to this sense of normalcy? Where did we get to our sense of normalcy? Our sense of normalcy is not the ancient sense of normalcy, because we do understand that the natural world works in certain ways, and the ways it works are often predictable, and some ways it works are always predictable. This came about during the scientific revolution at the beginning of the 17th century. Prior to the 17th century, there was not widespread agreement about how nature worked, how the world worked. There were different opinions about how it worked. But early in the 17th century, in Europe, there were developments that happened in how we understand the world. The scientific revolution begins with great figures like Francis Bacon and Isaac Newton in particular, who began to realize that they cannot use their philosophical understandings of the world and what makes sense to them philosophically, and they cannot use their religious views in order to understand the workings of nature. How do you understand the workings of nature? Someone like Isaac Newton began to insist that the only way to understand nature is simply by looking at it carefully and bracketing any religious and philosophical views you have.
Now, is that true about Isaac Newton? No. Where is Bart getting his information from? He never sources any of it. He says that Newton claimed this, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And what I did find is that Newton constantly referenced his beliefs within his own scientific works. For example, he wrote a paper on optics. You can find this online, and he's constantly referring to God all the time. And he refers to actions that God did and biblical truths. And he does that all throughout the paper on optics. And he does it in other things too. He never brackets his belief on God, and I could not find anywhere where he said that he thinks that God should be bracketed when he does science. So again, this is something that Bart claims, but has no evidence at all for it. If he thinks that, he's welcome to send me something. I promised one of the guys that the one who gave me the permission for the 7-minute clips. He wanted me to. He said, "You can do it. Just can you send me the copy of the video?" And I asked him why. He said because he just wants to look at it. So okay. I mean, I'm fine with that. I don't mind. He said he doesn't plan on reviewing it, but I don't care if he does. It ain't gonna bother me any. Unlike Bart Ehrman, as we'll see at some point, I don't have a problem with someone telling me that they think I'm wrong. I'm okay with someone telling me that they think I'm wrong, because I think they're wrong. So I'm okay with that. I don't have a big deal about it. But Bart has an issue with people telling him he's wrong, or telling anyone they're wrong. And we'll see that later when he does his closing argument. But I don't have a problem with that. Because there are times when I am wrong. But I am not wrong about this because I've actually extensively studied it. I've actually took the liberty of looking up works on Isaac Newton, and Isaac Newton constantly references God and God's actions, both in the Bible and his actions in nature. So this, I don't know where he's getting it from that he thinks Isaac Newton bracketed God. Now, could he appeal to authority of people that does actually bracket God, and possibly even some Christians? Well, yeah. I mean, there's some people in the modern era that profess Christians. Me and Dr. Jason Lau talked about this on the last video I had with him on it, on presuppositional apologetics and the transcendental argument. And when we discussed this, there are people in the modern era that have this. And by the way, I asked Dr. Jason Lau that question because I actually forgot that it was Bart Ehrman who actually said that. And I asked him if Isaac Newton bracket God. He said no. He didn't bracket God in anything. And this is a PhD scientist, by the way. Dr. Jason Lau is an astrophysicist. He's a PhD scientist. He's done actual work in the scientific field. Apart from Christian apologetics, apart from evangelism and so forth, he's actually done work in the scientific field. He made some discoveries about the sun using the Soho, I think it was a satellite or telescope, something like that. I think telescope, maybe Soho telescope, something like that. But he actually made discoveries about the sun, things that people didn't even know at the time. So he's an actual PhD scientist who's done real scientific research in the actual field of science. And I asked him specifically, it says, did Isaac Newton bracket God? And he said, no, he never bracketed God. And I took the liberty of checking it out, and he references God constantly in the works and stuff like that he did. So Dr. Jason Lau was correct, but Dr. Bart Ehrman was not. And of course, Bart Ehrman never sources anything. You can say, well, maybe Dr. Jason Lau was doing it in the form of an interview, so he was just answering a question real quick. But I actually took the liberty of actually looking it up, and I did source, because likely his paper on optics. Just Google his paper on optics, and you can find it online. He's constantly referencing God. So this idea that he doesn't reference God when he does science is inaccurate. It's not true at all. And I could not find any reference where Isaac Newton specifically said that. And you think that if Bart's going to throw out that bombshell, you think he would have sourced it, but he doesn't source it. He never sources anything. And his whole opening statement was more of throwing out objections and accusations and that sort of thing. It wasn't designed to back up what he's saying. And you think that you're in a debate, that's exactly what you would be doing. But he doesn't do that. All right, let's continue.
And when you do that, you can discover the law of gravity.
When you do that, you can discover the law of gravity. You can't discover the law of gravity if you don't bracket God. Why would my belief in God require, or why would me discovering a law of nature happens only if you bracket God? In fact, science is actually predicated on the biblical Christian worldview. If God didn't exist, there would be no justification for the laws of logic, which we use to drive at conclusions. There'd be no reason at all, no justification for finding, or why we should find, patterns and regularity in nature. And the laws of nature would make no sense apart from the biblical Christian God. We're fixing to get into that. I don't want to cover that at this point because we're going to be getting more into that here in a second. But apart from the biblical Christian God, you would not, we would have no justification for the laws of nature anyhow. And so, no. In fact, now there are Christians who profess Christianity, but they do bracket God. I don't agree with that philosophy. And it's an appeal to authority to point to someone who just happens to agree with the philosophy. Because I can also point to people like Dr. Jason Lau who don't agree with that philosophy. That would not make one philosophy true or not true. But what would count in that favor is the fact that that it's not consistent to bracket God when all of science is predicated on the belief that God exists, on the justification of God's existence. Christian biblical worldview is the only one that can make sense of that. You, in fact, as atheists, you would have to borrow from my worldview to do science. And if you're a Christian who actually holds the position of Christianity, then it would be internally consistent for you as well to know what the truth is, but bracketing it anyhow to do science, which you have to borrow from that position regardless. At least when atheists do it, they typically don't realize, a lot of them don't realize they're borrowing from our worldview. But a Christian knows they're borrowing from the worldview in which they're having to bracket. So you can't really bracket that completely anyhow. At the end of the day, it cannot be bracketed. All right, but you can make discoveries, even believing God exists, not just the fact that we have a justification for those things, but also believing God exists. You could believe God exists and believe that he is acting in nature. And by the way, Christians actually believe in what's called a dual causation. The fact that we're willing to admit or believe that the laws of nature, are in effect. But that would not mean that God is not behind the laws of nature. And so we would believe that God is still, in his sovereignty, still upholding those laws. We don't view it as God not having anything to do with the laws of nature at all. That's actually the either-or fallacy. It isn't either the laws of nature are doing this or God is doing this. No, it's both are doing it. Laws of nature, which God has set up, is operating the things normally, and God is the ultimate sustainer of those laws. He's upholding the universe by his power. That's what the Bible says. He upholds the universe. He upholds it by his power. And because of that, we do believe in what's called a dual causation. Okay? So it's not an either-or situation. It's an and both. All right, let's continue.
Newton, of course, had a theory of gravity, and it didn't actually make much sense to him. But he realized that it had to be true because he could observe it. He was a highly religious man. He wrote as much on the Bible and theology as he wrote on science. But he explicitly says that when it comes to empirical observation of how the world works, he has to bracket his religious views and his philosophical views. And he doesn't really understand how these things happen, but he can show that they happen by empirical observation. And that's how he came up with his theory of gravity, which made sense to no one. How is it that something...
Bart said that Isaac Newton explicitly said that. Where does he say that? Again, he doesn't give any information for his sources. None. He doesn't explicitly say that. If he does, Bart certainly didn't quote it. And I looked it up. I couldn't find it. I could try again just to see if it's out there. I mean, there's always a possibility. People have been known to be inconsistent before. And you could actually point to scientists today, they're professing Christians, that may share Bart's philosophy here. It's always possible. People that actually do. But I don't think Isaac Newton's one of them. But either way, you're going to have to sit there and give actual quotations. You're going to have to source your information. He never sources it. He does this big old PowerPoint presentation. You'd think he would at least put some of the source information in his PowerPoint presentation. He does it. The only thing he ever sources is the Bible. He doesn't source any of his information. It's just like one big throw up of objections and accusations that's being thrown at us, but not anything substantial. All right, let's continue.
Can assert a force without being physically present to it. How can you drop a rock? Why does it fall to the ground? It must be because there are other particles in the air that are forcing it down. Well, the idea that actually a body it could be attracting other bodies without interfering substance. That didn't make any sense. Well, he bracketed that. It's not because...
Again, he didn't bracket it, just to let you know.
Because he was anti-supernatural. He, in fact, believed in the supernatural world. He was an alchemist. On top of being a committed Christian, he certainly believed in things, but when it came to his science, he realized that the nature works in certain predictable ways, and we start getting the laws of nature.
Once again, he's committing the either-or fallacy. Either you bracket this, or, but Isaac Newton didn't bracket it. The fact that he discovered laws of nature doesn't mean he had to bracket his beliefs. I guess Bart assumes that probably because he's assuming that nobody prior to this point in time ever thought about maybe something else causing something. But that's not... I wouldn't exactly say that's entirely true, because I think there were people in history that thought so. But let's assume that that's the case. It's a genetic fallacy, but whatever. All right. Would that mean that Isaac Newton did not see a dual causation in it? No, it wouldn't. Again, either-or fallacy. Both are true. Yes, the laws of nature, which God created, oppose the universe the way it is, makes the universe normatively act like that when it's left to itself. God sustains those laws and upholds them because he upholds the universe by his power. It's called a dual causation, and this is recognized across the board in terms of Christianity. And so Isaac Newton would have understood it as a dual causation, where both gravity and the law of gravity, that will pull everything down, and God upholds that law. He wouldn't have seen God as being separate from it. Just like when he wrote his paper on optics, he didn't see God as being separate from the issues. He saw God being very much involved in it, actually. And same thing with the law of gravity. I guess, again, Bart's making an either-or fallacy. He's assuming either the laws of nature are working at it or God is doing it. And if the laws of nature are working at it, then God can't be the one behind it. But that's not the position of Christians, and not even historically. I mean, we look at this as being a dual causation. It's not a question of either one or the other. It's a question of both. Both are involved. It's not exclusively contradictory to say both are involved. If I go do something and my wife helps me go do it, I've been having back issues lately, so maybe she's helped me lift something up. And I say I lifted that up, and I said that my wife and me lifted that up. Well, that just means that we both were involved. You say, contradiction, that can't be. You can't both be involved. Yes, we can. We both can be involved in picking something up. The laws of nature and God are both involved in how the universe works. God is ultimately involved either way, because God's the one who set the laws up in the first place. But he's about to get to his law, what I've been calling his laws of nature argument, and so we're going to get to that.
The laws of nature, as Mike was saying, indicate what happened regularly within the natural world. Physicists and others use the laws of nature in various ways, and sometimes kind of loosely, like historians use the term proof loosely sometimes. Sometimes they'll talk about gravity as a law of nature. It's actually not a law of nature. You have Newton's theory and you've got Einstein's theory. These are like so probable. You can show that they work. They just work because you can make predictions with them. There are other things that are laws. The three laws of thermodynamics, or the laws of conservation in physics. They just are laws. They always happen. How are they established? They're established by close observation of the world and just seeing how it works time after time after time after time. and showing that if you understand it this way, you can predict what's going to happen next. That's how science works, because you can predict what's going to happen next because you know these laws. And look, who wants to be lawless? If you're living in the modern world, you may not think much of science. A lot of people don't for some reason, but they still drive cars, and they use their washing machines, and they really appreciate it when they can take a Tylenol, and their entire lives are wrapped up in modern science, even as they sometimes denigrate it. I think it's a shame to denigrate science. The word science means, in Latin word, scientia, it means knowledge. The opposite of knowledge is ignorance.
All right. The laws of nature only make sense in the Christian biblical worldview. His argument here on the laws of nature is actually circular. It's a vicious circle. It's vicious circles when it's an arbitrary circle where the premise assumes the conclusion. You know, the assumption, the conclusion is actually assumed in the premise. In this case, the assumption would be that God does not exist, because the only way his argument worked on the laws of nature is if God was not present. If God did not exist, that's the only way it would work. It could not work if God exists. But yet science is predicated on the biblical Christian worldview. Sir Francis Bacon, which he mentioned, is actually the founder of the scientific method. He was also a Christian. Both him and Isaac Newton was a Christian, and they did not bracket their beliefs on, at least I know Isaac Newton did. And I'm not sure about Francis Bacon, but I doubt it, seriously doubt it. But I know that Isaac Newton didn't, in spite of what he might have said. Francis Bacon, in fact, the scientific method, Isaac Newton's laws of motion based on law of cause and effect, things like that. These are all based on actual biblical Christian principles. So they were not bracketing their beliefs on God. Again, like I said, Bart's probably assuming either or. You can't be able to discover the laws of nature if you think God is behind it, which is not the case, because God can be behind it and the laws of nature can be true. So that was just either or fallacy on the part of Bart. The reality is that you can know, you can actually do science. You can do science as an atheist, but you have to borrow from our worldview to do it, because the science is based on the Christian biblical worldview. It's predicated by it. The science would not be possible apart from the biblical Christian worldview. What justification would you ever have for the laws of nature in a strictly materialistic universe, which is believed by atheists, that's based on chance, that's based on chaos, randomness, that's not orderly at all, that's strictly materialistic, no supernatural component at all, strictly materialistic? How would you ever be able to justify the laws of nature? Why would there be laws ordering the universe, which is non-orderly? Why would there be laws of nature governing that? Why would we expect to find patterns in nature? He talks about this in his discussion. I probably didn't have it in the clip exactly, but he does actually talk about this in a thing. He says, well, patterns of nature, we just have, there are just patterns in nature, we just discover them. But why do we discover patterns in nature? Why are they discoverable by us? Apart from the biblical Christian worldview, why would you even trust your thoughts? In an atheistic worldview, there's no reason to trust our thoughts. Our thoughts are generated by chemical reactions and electric synapses going off. In which case, those go off random, and everybody's brain chemistry is different. And so, why would you ever trust your thoughts? Maybe your thoughts and your beliefs are just based on your brain's random mechanisms just happening. You know, the chemicals going off in your brain and so forth. Why would you ever trust your thoughts? apart from the biblical Christian worldview, we would have no justification for the laws of logic either. And logic is necessary in order to derive at a conclusion, first of all, or a valid conclusion. In fact, the only reason we know what's valid and invalid is through the laws of logic. The laws of logic is what justifies that. So how would that work in a strictly materialistic universe? How would non-material laws that govern the way we think, that the way we ought to think, why would that? How would the laws of logic be justifiable in a strictly atheistic worldview? But yet you have to use laws of logic to derive a conclusion. That whether that conclusion is historical, whether that conclusion is scientific, you still have to use the laws of logic to justify that conclusion. In other words, the laws of nature only make sense in a biblical Christian worldview. So if God does exist, which apparently he does, because otherwise you would have no justification for the laws of logic at all. Atheists have to borrow from our worldview to be able to argue for their position, or try to argue for it. In which case, the laws of logic does make, or the laws of nature can only make sense in the biblical Christian worldview. So in that case, his circular argument, assuming God does not exist, if God does not exist, we have no justification for the laws of nature in the first place. And if God does exist, which apparently he does, in that case, the existence of God would make it much more probable that Jesus would rise again from the dead. Because again, God transcends the laws of nature. What does that mean? It means he exists outside of it. He exists apart from it. The laws of nature do not govern the actions of God. Now, during the course of this whole discussion, he's constantly strawmanning us. In fact, he asked Mike Licona, I don't have the clips for it, but he asked Mike Licona during the his Q&A, or his question and answer period or the crossfire period with Mike Licona. He asked him, said, well, what historian writing in an academic press has ever thought that the laws of nature have been violated? Well, the correct answer is none of them. But then again, no Christian claims that either. We're not arguing that. And Mike Licona tells him that during that. We're not arguing that the miracles are a violation of laws of nature. We're not claiming that. So, well, you think someone, and Bart brings this up to him, he said, well, you think somebody raised from the dead, but we don't think it's naturally. You know, the funny thing is, Bart actually debated William Lane Craig, and William Lane Craig told him the same thing in the debate. He told him the same thing. He said that we're not arguing that Jesus rose from the dead naturally. We realize this is a supernatural event. So we're not claiming that he naturally rose from the dead. But yet, Bart continued that straw man during the course of the debate. And it's not a position that we hold. And then he would ask a question when he already knows the answer to. Like, well, what scholar would say that? Well, the answer would be none of them. Not even the ones that think that the resurrection can be proven. Including Mike Licona, including myself. No, none of us would say that. Because that's not what we're arguing. We're not arguing that the law of nature got violated. We're not arguing that. We realize this is a supernatural event in which God, who transcends the laws of nature, who acts as an outside agent, who's not at all under any obligation able to have to obey by those laws, because he created those laws to govern the universe, how the universe normally operates. And so if God wants to return somebody from the dead, he certainly can do it. The only reason that Bart has for arguing something like this is because he's presupposing that God does not exist. It's the only reason. All right, let's switch to Bart's closing argument. And I got a few things to say concerning that.
All right. I am going to end on a serious note. I want to end by saying what is ultimately at stake for me in this kind of back and forth. Why would I care if conservative evangelical apologists think that they can demonstrate that their faith claims are true with the implication that the faith claims of everyone else are wrong? Why don't I just say, no, I don't think so? Well, here's why. We live in a remarkably diverse world. There are some people who celebrate our diversity. Not everyone has to be the same. I agree with that attitude and the actions that result from it. All people are equally valuable, and no one should be opposed for who they are, for their race, sex, gender identity, nationality, economic status, political party, philosophical ideas, life choices, or religious beliefs and practices. I'm a huge fan of live and let live, with one caveat. I draw the line in harming others.
All right. In his closing argument, he basically does something. Now, when I originally first saw this in the debate, I thought he was bringing up something entirely new that he hasn't mentioned at all. But he does briefly mention the thing where he thinks that he has a problem with us saying that we can prove it and something about oppression. That was the only time he ever said anything. So it wasn't entirely new, but for the most part, this is a completely new argument that he brings up. He brings up certain issues during the closing argument where he thinks that that Christians are oppressing others because we tell them that they're wrong and that we can prove what we believe is true and prove what other people believe is false. And so he says, oh, that's wrong. You're hurting other people. You're oppressing other people. Now, when I looked up the definition of oppressing, that means continual harm to them. So he thinks that not only we're hurting them, but we're continuing to do so by telling them that they're wrong and we're right and we could prove it. And the irony of this situation is this whole argument is self-refuting, because guess what Bart's doing? He's telling us we're wrong, telling other people they're wrong. And he could prove that we're wrong about telling other people that they're wrong, that we could prove it. Yep. It's a self-refuting argument. Wow. It's about like saying, never say never. And you're thinking, okay, you just said never. And he's telling us that we're wrong about that in the process of telling us not to tell other people we're wrong. And there's another issue. Is telling someone they're wrong oppressing them? Is it hurting them? No. There have been situations where Christians might have gone beyond what their belief system tells them to do. You know, like they might go beyond, their belief system might go beyond, or they'll go beyond their belief system and, you know, act in a way that's not Christian-like. That's always possible, but that's nothing against Christianity itself, the belief system itself, or whether or not if we can prove it or it's wrong for us to say that we can prove it. That's not oppressing others. There's lots of Christians that and by the way, within Christianity, we value people. This idea that we're undervaluing people if we don't agree with their lifestyle choices or their religious beliefs. No. Christians believe in valuing other people. Now, we have not always consistently, Christians have not always consistently applied that, but as a body of belief system, we do believe that people have value because we're created in the image of God, and that all people have value. And that's always been the Christian position, and it still is the Christian position. That doesn't mean that everybody should be right about what they're claiming. Okay, and it doesn't mean that that we can't prove what we're saying is true and that someone else is wrong, or shouldn't prove somebody is wrong and prove ourselves right. It doesn't mean that. Think of an analogy like this. Suppose somebody is fixing to walk off of a cliff because they're so convinced there's a bridge there that's going to keep them from falling. But you know there's no bridge there at all. That as soon as they take that final step, they're going into this big old chasm and they will not survive. What should you do that? You have a moral obligation to tell them, no, don't go that way. If you go that way, you're going to fall to your death. We have that obligation to do that. Am I hurting someone now? No, I'm preventing harm to them. I'm trying to save them. I'm trying to keep them from going off that cliff. But I'm not at all trying to oppress them and hurt them and make them feel less of a person because they believe that there's no bridge there, or they believe that there is a bridge there when there isn't. No, I'm trying to save them from that fall. Because I know when they take that final step, it's over. And I don't want it to be over for them. If I care about them, if I value them as human beings, then I'm going to sit there and say something about them going up that cliff. If Christians know that people are going to go to hell when they die, that hell is a real place, are we not under a moral obligation to tell somebody about it before they walk off that side of that cliff that may take that final step off to their doom? Are we not morally obligated? It would be wrong. We would not value them. We would have to be lesser than a human being not to warn them to go off that cliff. We could not possibly be valuing them at all as a person if we allow them to step off that cliff. The only sensible thing, the only moral thing to do, the only human thing to do would be to warn them ahead of time. It is not wrong for us to give them that warning. Bart must be assuming that if they don't want to be warned, then you shouldn't warn them. The guy that doesn't want to be warned that there's no bridge there, when he's convinced himself there's a bridge there, doesn't mean that I'm hurting him when I'm presenting him with the truth. Because I know that there was no bridge there. And I want to make sure that when he took that step, there's a bridge there. Or at least has a parachute that will guide him to the bottom. But it'd be wrong of me not to say anything at all. I have a moral obligation to say something to him. So Bart's whole attempt here is an attempt to censor us. Censor Christianity. So that way, only ones who will be talking about it and talking about how wrong they think we are going to be the skeptics. No. That's not happening. And any attempt by Bart to do this is going to end up in disaster. Now, here in a little bit, he's going to name a list of different people in different situations, but we're going to deal with that here in a second.
You have no right to do that. What has that to do with this debate? Many of the people I love and hold dear, family and friends, are believing Christians. None of them thinks they can prove they are right and that others are wrong. If they did, they would not be my closest loved ones.
They would not be his closest loved ones if they were the kind of people that told people that they're wrong. Wow. Why does Bart do debates in the first place? I know he told us the reason, but his reason is self-refuting. tell someone that they're wrong without telling people wrong, and therefore go through a whole debate situation where he's telling people they're wrong, they're telling people they're wrong, and they can prove it. It's just it's like a mirror image. It's self-contradictory. It keeps arguing its way into a circle. But in any given case, if you're going to do debates, you always, if you're going to do debates, you're going to have to be used to being told that you're wrong about something, even if that's not the case. You can't just simply, oh no, I can't stand being wrong. I don't like people telling me that I'm wrong. No, you got to be willing to take it. Okay? I can handle people telling me I'm wrong. You know, I've been wrong before. It's always possible. But a lot of times, I'm usually not wrong. You know, I would research it and I was right about it, or whatever the case may be. But I'm human. I'm not infallible. So I can still be wrong, you know. But in any case, the fact that someone tells me I'm wrong, whether I am or not, makes no difference. But if someone tells me that I'm wrong and I just say, no, you can't tell me that I'm wrong. Yeah, you can. Bart's doing it right now. So yeah, you can. So why does he think that you can't tell somebody that they're wrong without hurting them? Let's continue.
Throughout the course of history, religious people who are passionately persuaded that their views are right and others are wrong have opposed those of other persuasions because they were different. Christians against Jews, Protestants against Catholics, Sunnis against Shiites, Hindus against Muslims, evangelicals against Mormons, and religious people against those different from them in race, sex, gender identity, national origin, or anything else.
This is a fallacy in logic called a sweeping generalization fallacy. He basically generalized all Christians in opposing different people and different groups. But in reality is that opposing someone's belief system is not the same as opposing them as an individual. I don't know how much Bart actually knows about logic, because he makes logical fallacies all the time. He gets accused of it quite often, not just by people like me, but by lots and lots of people. He's been accused. He gets accused of some of the logical fallacies that I've accused him of as well by Mike McCone in this debate, you know, doing things like circumstantial ad hominem fallacies and so forth. And so he gets accused of it a lot, especially arguments from science and appeals to authority and that sort of thing. But he does it a lot, quite significantly. But I don't know how much he actually knows about logic. But in ad hominem is when you attack the person rather than dealing with the argument itself. And so in logic, we make a distinction between the person who is making the argument versus the argument they're making. We make that distinction. When someone attacks the person rather than the argument, that's called an ad hominem. When a person deals specifically with the argument, it's not an ad hominem. We make a direct distinction between the person making the argument versus the argument itself. And because of that, Christians historically and all the way to the present have understood there's a difference between attacking them as a person versus attacking what they believe, what they're arguing, the positions that they hold. It's not the same as attacking them. What Bart is doing is he's trying to conflate those two so that when we attack what they believe, we're attacking them, when in reality we're not. Let's continue.
The big problem I have with conservative evangelical apologetics is that it is an attempt to demonstrate that its views are not only acceptable and helpful, but that they are factually right, and they alone are right. That means everything else is false.
He says that the view is evangelical apologists. It's not just apologists, it's not just evangelicals. This is held by, in fact, it's not even just Christians. Other people, other worldviews, even atheism, are doing the same thing. We're all doing the same thing. regardless. It's not just Christians, it's not just evangelicals, and it ain't just Christian apologists. And they're all doing the same thing. They're telling each other they're wrong about their position. But what he said was absolutely correct as far as if I'm right, then that means everybody else is wrong. Well, that's true. I mean, that's the way it goes. If I say God exists and Bart says no, he doesn't, only one person can be right about that. There's no middle ground. There isn't nuances. Well, maybe there's multiple gods. No, because if you are denying the divinity, any possibility of a deity, it wouldn't matter, what on that goes. You're denying all of it. Okay, so this is what's called the Law of Excluded Middle. And so either God exists or he doesn't exist. There is no middle ground on that, either one way or the other. That's not an either or fallacy, because there is no middle ground. There is no alternate third option. It's got to be one or the other. And so when you're dealing with a situation like that, somebody is right and somebody is wrong. So anyone who says, hey, I don't believe God exists, and I say, well, I do, then only one of us can be wrong. We both can't be right. God can't both exist and not exist. That's impossible. I can't both be here and not here. That'd be self-contradictory. So either God exists or he doesn't exist. And that's not the either or fallacy. It's in accordance with the Law of Excluded Middle. Only one of those options could be correct. And so that's just how it goes. And if you look at all the different belief systems, they're very self-contradictory with other belief systems. God in Christianity is transcendent, whereas in pantheistic views and Hinduism, especially Hinduism, God is part of the universe. It's pantheistic views. God is part of the universe, or the deity is the gods, which are just representative of forces of nature. They're part of the universe, in which case they're not transcendent. The gods of polytheism were corporeal, like me and you. In fact, they were very much like me and you. Whereas the God of the Bible is very different. You got Islam and Christianity believes in heaven and hell, but other types of belief systems don't. Atheism denies all of that and believes that in the evolution, which most Christians, not all, but most of them would reject. Those kinds of things. So yeah, we're very different, and we have very self-contradictory views. That's self-contradictory. That does not add up. So only one person can be right. Only one or one group can be right, because our views are way too different. But sitting there saying someone is wrong is not wrong in itself. And like I said, it's self-refuting, because Bart's telling us that we're wrong. So he's doing the right thing, and he's telling us that he shouldn't do. But the fact that we all have differences doesn't mean that everybody is right and equally valid, because the different beliefs are different. The beliefs are self-contradictory with each other. In addition to that, you also have the problem with that type of view, because if I sit there and say, am I right when I say that only one person is right? If you say no, if you say no, you're wrong, we all can be right, or whatnot. Well, then you just contradict yourself. So it winds up being self-contradictory either way. But none of these arguments that he's making right here in this closing argument are really adding up. They're bad arguments, terrible arguments. But he's presenting them in his closing argument, because although in the when they sectioned it out, they put Mike Lacona's last in the list of videos, I noticed. But in the actual debate that I watched live, Bart Ehrman had the last word in the debate. So in actuality, Mike didn't have a chance to respond to a lot of the stuff that he put in his closing argument. And you're not supposed to put anything new in your closing argument. That's like an unspoken rule. Even if it's not a specific written rule in most debates. Sometimes it is, but most debates is not a written rule. But it's always unspoken, because it's unfair to the other person when the other person doesn't have a chance to respond to a lot of things that he's saying. And a lot of things he's saying, he might don't have a chance to respond to. So that puts it, makes the debate really unfair. Now, overall, I did like the debate. I really did. I enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite debates now with Mike Licona and Bart Ehrman. Before, my favorite debate with them was when they debated on the historicity of the Gospels. But this has now become my favorite debate with them both in it. Probably my favorite debate with either one of them has debated, because they both of them debate separately, other people as well. So this is my favorite debate, both of them together and apart, as far as that goes. But so I liked the debate. I thought they did a really good job of moderating it and so forth. But Bart's arguments were really, really bad. But in any given case, let's continue so we can try to get to some of the more juicy elements of his closing arguments.
Those who think they can prove the resurrection may not be meaning to put other people down and to be marginalizing and insisting that they conform to their version of the truth, but in fact, they are doing just that. Even if they are really nice guys and gals otherwise who claim otherwise. For them, all other religions are wrong in their various ways. Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Shintoism, Jainism, and go on and on. And for the evangelical Protestants who take this approach, all other Christians are wrong. Catholics, Greek Orthodox, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, and those liberal mainliners, and on and on.
Again, sweeping generalization fallacy. But interesting. He throws in Roman Catholics, he throws in Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses are considered cults, so they're actually not considered Christian by mainline lines. It's not just evangelicals, even non-evangelicals wouldn't consider Mormons Christians. So it's not just evangelicals. This mainstream Christianity does not consider Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses as Christians. I don't know of any Christian that thinks that they are. There are Christians that dispute whether Roman Catholicism is part of Christianity or not. They're actually classified officially. They're not a cult, but they are officially classified as as what is called a branch of Christianity, or a branch of Christendom is how they present it. But there are people, Calvinists particularly, that have problems with Roman Catholicism, so it is kind of disputed. I usually don't get involved in those disputes, but there are people that dispute whether Roman Catholics are really Christian or not, based on their understanding of the gospel and things like that. And it gets kind of complicated, but that's among the main reasons that they don't think that they're Christians, and so there are disputes over that. But Roman Catholicism has some additional beliefs that kind of kind of just alters their understanding of things and makes them way too flexible, depending on the whims of the Pope. And they have what's called apostolic succession, which anything the Popes say is as good as law, and that could change from person to person, obviously. And so I think recently the Roman Catholicism now accepted the views on evolution and the Big Bang Theory and things like that. And so, at least I heard so. But again, they are wrong. And is it a bad thing? He says it's bad to tell them they're wrong. It's you're oppressing them. You're hurting them. You're demeaning their humanity when you tell them that they're wrong. No, you're not. What is Bart basing this on? How is it hurtful to other people to tell them they're wrong? And by the way, every one of those groups that they named, including the Mormons, would say that we're wrong. They said the exact same thing, just in reverse. You going to have a whole debate with Mormons, Bart? Probably not. But they're doing the same thing. In fact, so are the atheists. So is Bart Ehrman. They're doing the very same thing. Is it hurting somebody to tell them that they're wrong? No. Is it hurting somebody to tell them you could prove that they're wrong? No. Again, we're back to that analogy. Someone's about to step off of a cliff. Is it wrong to warn them ahead of time not to do that? No. Am I a bad person? No, but I would be a bad person if I didn't say something. If I didn't say something and told them not to do that, warn them ahead of time, tell them the fact of the matter is there is no bridge there. No, that would not be wrong. It would be wrong to not do it. But it wouldn't be wrong to tell them about it, would it? No. All right, let's continue.
They're not only wrong, they are destined to eternal punishment, either torment or annihilation.
Again, we don't really say that about Roman Catholics. I mean, unless someone doesn't really believe that they're Christians and that they're not saved by a true gospel. That sort of thing. But, so what? If that's true, again, we're back to the analogy of someone fixing to walk off a cliff and they think there's a bridge there. We're morally obligated to tell them, no, there's no bridge there. You're going to go off that cliff. Is that wrong for me to do that? No. It'd be wrong to not do that. Bart seems to have his priorities mixed up. He seems to think that it's okay to let that person go off that cliff and he'll find out when he reaches the bottom that there was no bridge there. But it's wrong for me to tell them that there's no bridge there and he's about to fall off that cliff. Just let him believe what he wants to believe. He wants to believe there's a bridge, let him go off. No. The exact opposite of that is true. All right, let's continue.
As Mike himself has alluded to. These other people are opposed to God, so ultimately God is opposed to them. God favors the ones who agrees with the apologists who will have eternal bliss.
They favor the ones that agree with the apologists that have eternal bliss. Does any Christian apologist claim that? No. No, none of them do. I'm not aware of a single one who claims you have to agree with everything I say to go to heaven. Now, there are certain things the Bible tells us that are required to go to heaven. And we could talk about that. But that's true regardless whether you're dealing with Christian apologists, evangelists, or anybody who's a true Christian. The fact that we have to tell somebody that they're wrong about their position and we're right about ours is not hurting them. And it's not oppressing them. I know I sound like a broken record, but how in the world? I mean, he's acting like this is only central focus in Christian apologists. The only Christian apologists are talking about proving what they believe, or arguing for their beliefs, or spreading spreading of the preaching of the position. No, Christian apologists might be among them, but there's lots of people that think that way. And it's not just even squarely connected only to evangelicals. It's not just connected to only Christians. There's people that are non-Christians of other faiths, worldviews, and belief systems all across the world, including atheism, are doing the same thing to everybody else, including us. So it's not just Christian apologists who are saying this. Everyone does it. Bart's doing it right now.
Few people know what this kind of exclusivism has done throughout the course of Christian history, but the stories are not good. And now, since the Enlightenment, oddly, I must say, Christian apologists are children of the Enlightenment, more than just about anybody. Now since the Enlightenment, these other views are not just wrong, they can be proved to be wrong.
Are Christians children of the Enlightenment? No, Christian apologists have actually been around a lot longer. I mean, that's the genetic fallacy, but Christians have been around that Bart's making. But Christians have been around a lot longer, or apologists have been around a lot longer. There were apologists in the 2nd century of the church. Justin Martyr, Ignatius, Irenaeus, and they were apologists. And guess what? There were Augustine. This idea of responding to other people. Augustine responded to Faustus about the critical objection that Faustus had against the authorship of the Gospels in his work against Faustus. This is 5th century. So this does not just birth the Enlightenment, so-called Enlightenment. I like to call the so-called Enlightenment period, I call it the de-Enlightenment, because it really just, where people thought they were getting smarter when they were actually getting dumber, because they thought that they can arbitrarily reject the Bible and be on good standing with truth, and it's not the case. And so I like to call it the de-Enlightenment. I like the way Dr. Jonathan Barty put it in his book, The Genesis Account. He called it the Endarkment. But I like de-Enlightenment better, so I want to use that term. But in any case, a lot of times, a lot of these skeptical objections actually arisen during the time of the so-called Enlightenment. In which case, naturally, because they arisen during the time of the so-called Enlightenment, Christian apologists obviously rose up and to defend against these challenges and respond to them accordingly. It doesn't mean that's the birth of Christian apologetics. Christian apologetics existed a lot longer than that, and been around for almost at the beginning of the church. Almost. I wouldn't exactly say it goes all the way back to Christ. It may not even go all the way back to 1st century. But it is very, very early 2nd century at the earliest, or at the latest, earliest time we can possibly give it. But this idea that somehow we only birthed during the Enlightenment period, no. But Christian apologists probably did arise during that period of time to respond to the objections and so forth. But Christians have always claimed to prove their position. This idea that Christian apologists only thought they could prove anything during the so-called Enlightenment. What was Augustine doing in the 5th century when some group came around critically attacking the authorship of the Gospels, and he writes a work against one particular critic named Faustus called Against Faustus. You can find this online if you want to read his work. I've got Against Faustus on my computers here. And in Against Faustus, he targets Faustus' objection to the authorship of the Gospels, and I'm not going to deal with that at this time because that's not the point of this video. But the point that I'm making on that is that Christian apologists have responded to other people attacking our positions, and we believed that we could prove what we're saying even before the so-called Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment was not the birth of when we thought we could prove what we were saying. There were Christians that thought they could prove it for many centuries before the so-called Enlightenment. So yeah, that is factually and historically inaccurate.
This can lead and has led and does lead to injustice, oppression, and suffering. I am not saying that Mike is persecuting others. I know he and his fellow apologists think they're doing good for the world. And the ones I know best, including Mike, are very, very good people themselves. But the views they hold in the end are harmful. Even in our day, whether it's their intent.
Our views are harmful. No. Now, what was that thing about? He said that our beliefs have led to oppression and have led to all kinds of destructive behavior and that sort of thing. There's always going to be people with any belief system that's going to abuse that belief system, that's going to go against the tenets of that belief system. Jesus said, pray for your enemies. There's going to be Christians that are not following that mandate by Christ and is going to wind up not praying for our enemies, not doing good to those who persecute us. and doing evil to them and things like that. There's always going to be people that's going to go against the worldview in which they believe in. That's going to be inconsistent with that worldview. Of course, that's the Quoque fallacy, appealing to hypocrisy, where someone just kind of assumes that if people are being inconsistent with the worldview, then that makes the worldview not true, which is not the case. The fact that someone is inconsistent with their worldview does not make the worldview untrue. And it certainly doesn't mean that we can't prove it, and it doesn't mean that our belief system itself is telling people that our beliefs are right and others are wrong or harmful. What a person does with it is their actions and their choices, and they have to face the consequences for that, even spiritual consequences. But that does not necessarily mean the very fact of telling somebody that I'm right and you're wrong, and that I can prove what I'm saying is true and what you're saying is false, is harmful to them. No. Why would you have a real issue of someone telling you that you're wrong, especially if you really are? I mean, wouldn't you want to know if you're wrong or not? This whole thing, again, it's self-refuting overall, because all the time he's telling people you can't tell people wrong, you can't tell people that you prove they're wrong, but yet he's doing exactly that. He's telling us he's wrong, and he thinks that he can prove that we're wrong about saying that we're wrong. Again, it's back to never say never. It's the whole thing is self-refuting. In any given case, let's finish up.
Intention or not, these views have led and continue to lead to suffering for women, opposition to people of color, gays, lesbians, bisexuals, transsexuals, and others with non-traditional gender identifications. They have led and continue to lead to opposition, sometimes violent opposition, to good, decent people of other religions and even of other kinds of Christianity. That's not right, and it's not Christian.
I agree that would not be right, and it would not be Christian to do that. But the idea that me telling somebody that they're wrong and I'm right and I can prove it doesn't lead to those things. That's actually a fallacy in itself. It's called the slippery slope fallacy. The idea that trying to say that A will lead to B, B will lead to C, C will lead to D, when there's no causal connection. There's no causal connection between me telling somebody that they're wrong versus somebody else who thinks someone's wrong and then acts inconsistent with their worldview. There's no coherence between the two. There's nothing that connects them causally. So this would be a fallacy in itself anyhow. But it doesn't lead to harm. It doesn't lead to harm. That doesn't necessarily mean someone might not do something bad, because sometimes Christians have been known at times to not follow through with their belief system completely. Like they may undervalue a person because of their homosexual lifestyles and things like that. And Christians have recently rose up, preachers too, that preach that's not the love of Christ. We shouldn't be that way. We should value every person, because our worldview is that everybody is an image bearer of God, regardless whether they believe what we believe or not, whether they are Christians or not. Every human being alive is an image bearer of God, and that includes Bart, that includes me, whether you believe in God or not. It includes everybody. And so in the Christian perspective, we do believe in valuing human beings. And so when a Christian acts inconsistently to the worldview on this and undermine homosexuals and things like that because they live in a lifestyle they don't agree with, Christians have risen up and said that's not the love of Christ. We need to be more loving about this and deal with this situation better than we've done in the past. And there's a lot of people that say that. I've said that, and I think that we ought to be better at handling the situation. But now there is another extreme that a lot of homosexuals go to as well, and a lot of people go to immediately, like, you're doing that very thing if you even tell me that my lifestyle choice is wrong, or that what I believe about my lifestyle choice is wrong, and that you could prove that it's wrong, and don't quote Bible to me because I don't believe in the Bible, that is not love. Love would be me telling them that life and sin, not being saved especially, is going to lead eventually to a home in hell. I mean, and again, we're back to that analogy where someone's about to walk off of a cliff. He thinks a bridge is there, but you know for a fact that it's not. But you want there to be a bridge there. You want there to be a bridge. If you get saved, Jesus will make that bridge appear. So you're not walking off the edge of a cliff. But if I know you're walking off the edge of a cliff, I am morally obligated to tell you about it. So we shouldn't go argue in the other extreme where we just make it completely prohibited to even tell them that they're wrong. No, we can still do that, but we must do it using the love of Christ in us. That's how we should be. That includes praying for them. That includes approaching with air of gentleness, not with anger and being appalled and having a really hypercritical spirit about it, a really negative spirit. We shouldn't approach it that way. We can say we don't agree with it. We can tell them why it's wrong. And we could try to help them get out of that. But do so using the love of Christ in doing it. And of course we should be like that. That's how we should be. Not all Christians have lived up to it, true enough. Some Christians haven't. And some Christians have actually been very negative to the point where, it has been harmful at that point. It doesn't mean that what their belief is harmful. It doesn't mean telling them about their belief is harmful. It doesn't mean trying to prove their belief is harmful. It just means that some people have made choices that have been harmful that they shouldn't have done. And it becomes a slippery slope fallacy to try to connect the two because they're not connected. Because there's also people that have made choices to follow through and do the love of Christ and at the same time while trying to preach the truth to them. And there's been homosexuals that have come out of that lifestyle to convert to Christianity and to be saved, and that is an awesome thing to see. And so so there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way. Christians have not always done it the right way, but we're working on it to get better at it. A lot of people are already working on it to get better at it. There's still some Christians that need work on that. But on the other opposite extreme, there's people that think like Bart. You shouldn't even tell me that what I'm doing is wrong. You shouldn't even tell me that my lifestyle, it's my choice to do what I want to with it. Just like it's that guy's choice to walk off that cliff without a bridge. But I'm morally obligated to tell him, no, don't do that. There's no bridge there. You will fall to your death. Let's continue.
Often I get asked why I do these debates, and this is why. And after I debate, I get asked, why did I get passionate about it, and this is why.
He says he often gets asked why he does these debates, and this is why. So he does these debates because he has a problem with people telling him he's wrong, so he decides to tell everybody else wrong, that they're wrong, and telling everybody else they're wrong, and that they could prove that other people are wrong. So the whole argument winds up being self-refuting. Well, that brings us to the end of the debate review. I really, really enjoyed this debate. It was an awesome debate. I thought everybody did a great job in it, even the ones like Bart with terrible arguments. And there are things that I didn't agree with Michael Conant on. Michael Conant believed that you can approach history worldview independent. You can't approach history worldview independent. It doesn't mean you can't prove the position. It just means it's impossible to do it worldview independent. And I actually said that during the chat, whenever they opened the chat window back up in between segments and stuff. I actually said that in the chat window that you can't do this worldview independent. It's not possible. Everyone has a worldview, and all evidence is interpreted through that worldview. Christians are different, but the Christian biblical worldview makes best sense of what we know. The atheist worldview wouldn't. How would the atheist worldview even make sense of the laws of nature in the first place? And Bart has to presuppose that God does not exist, and all the while borrowing from our worldview to justify why the laws of nature even exist, to have an orderly designed universe like we have. In a strictly atheistic universe, there would be no reason for it. Well, that's all I have for now. The next thing I have on my list, I want to do a debate review. Like I already mentioned earlier during my introduction, I want a debate review between Ken Hovind and a scientist person named Maddie on modern day debate. I do plan on having that. That was going to be awesome. I'll try to see if I can put some timestamps of this debate review in the description box. It'll be after the debate review is already up on YouTube, but I'll get it on there, try to get it on there. And of course, I have a big series coming soon called the Genesis series. It's going to be the biggest I've ever done on the book of Genesis. I am very looking forward to doing that series. So stay with me all the way to the end of that. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Again, this is Brian Bowen from Apologetics 101, and I'll see you on the next one.